Nathan Reynolds never imagined that a dog would change his fate. In the middle of war, where survival depends on seconds, an unexpected encounter between a soldier and an abandoned dog would create an unbreakable bond. But when Nathan fell in battle and was left behind, everyone believed it was over, everyone except Ranger. What this dog did that night left an entire platoon speechless. Now, discover how a simple war dog refused to accept the loss of his soldier and did the impossible to save him. The fine dust mixed with the scorching desert heat as Nathan Reynolds stepped off the helicopter with his backpack slung over his shoulders. The deafening roar of the rotors was quickly replaced by the sound of hurried voices, shouted orders, and the clinking of metal equipment. He had been there for less than an hour, and he could already feel the weight of war pressing down on him. Forward operating base. Red Rock was nothing more than a cluster of reinforced tents, armored trucks, and concrete walls wrapped in barbed wire. The air smelled of diesel fuel and sweat, and every soldier that passed by carried a silent tension in their eyes. Nathan had heard stories about Afghanistan, but nothing prepared him for actually being there. The cracked, dry earth stretched as far as the eye could see, and the sun scorched his skin like it wanted to test him. "Welcome to hell, Reynolds." The deep voice of Sergeant Miller pulled him from his thoughts. Nathan adjusted his backpack and nodded. "One hell of a hot place, mon, sir." Miller let out a dry laugh. "You get used to it, or you die trying." The days passed quickly. The routine was exhausting. Endless patrols, perimeter checks, equipment maintenance, and scarce food. Rest was rare, and what little they had was often interrupted by distant explosions or warnings of potential attacks. Nathan was no rookie in the army, but war was nothing like training. The fear never completely disappeared, it just became part of daily life. But it was during a night patrol that something unexpected happened. It was past midnight when Nathan and his team moved through a narrow alley in an abandoned village. The only light came from the pale moon above, the silence making everything even more unnerving. Then Nathan heard it, a faint sound, almost imperceptible, a whimper. He clenched his fist, signaling the others to stop. His rifle was steady in his hands as he scanned the area. The sound came again. He lowered his flashlight towards a pile of rubble between two crumbling buildings. Something moved. A dog, thin, dirty, with patches of burnt fur and a visibly injured hind leg. It was a German shepherd, but so malnourished that its bones showed beneath its stretched skin. Nathan frowned. What was a dog doing out here? Alone. The animal lifted its head, golden eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. It let out a weak growl, a warning without real threat. Nathan recognized fear when he saw it. Slowly, he knelt and pulled a small piece of dried meat from his pocket. "Hey, buddy, you hungry?" The dog sniffed the air but didn't move. It was wary. Nathan placed the food on the ground and stepped back slightly. The dog hesitated, but hunger won the battle. Crawling forward, it snatched the meat and devoured it in seconds. The other soldiers watched the scene with indifference. "Leave it, Reynolds. Let's move." One of them muttered, but Nathan couldn't walk away. Something about the dog didn't sit right with him. And then he saw it. A collar, worn, nearly torn, with a faded military serial number engraved on it. This wasn't just some stray dog. This dog had been trained. This dog belonged to someone. And judging by its condition, whoever that was hadn't treated him well. Nathan didn't know why, but something inside him refused to leave it behind. He pulled out another piece of food, extending his hand. The dog growled again, hesitated, and then finally moved closer. Nathan smiled. "You're tough, huh?" The dog chewed slowly, never taking its eyes off him. "I'll call you Ranger." Getting Ranger back to base was a challenge. Rules were clear, no animals allowed. But Nathan found a way. During patrol, he snuck Ranger into the back of the truck, ignoring the eye rolls from his squad. When they arrived at the base, he tried to take him straight to his tent without attracting attention. That lasted exactly 15 minutes before Captain Harris found out. The officer crossed his arms, eyes narrowed. "Reynolds, why the hell is there a dog in my barracks?" Nathan opened his mouth to answer, but before he could, Ranger barked. The captain stared at the dog, then back at Nathan. "Is this some kind of joke?" Nathan stood firm. "Sir, he was injured. I couldn't just leave him." Harris sighed, rubbing his face. "You know the rules. This dog can't stay here." Nathan tried to stay calm. "Sir, he's not just any dog. He has a military collar. He's been trained before. He could be useful to us." Harris studied Ranger for a moment. The dog, sitting beside Nathan, simply stared back at him as if he knew his future was being decided. The silence stretched until Harris finally exhaled sharply. "If he causes problems, it's on you." Nathan grinned. "Yes, sir." Harris narrowed his eyes. "And just to be clear, if I catch this dog inside the barracks, sleeping in a soldier's bed, I'll have you both digging trenches for a month." Nathan tried to keep a straight face. "Understood, sir." Harris shot one last glance at Ranger before walking away, muttering something about "damn sentimental idiots." As soon as the captain was gone, Nathan looked down at Ranger and gave him a light pat on the neck. "Looks like you just found yourself a place here, buddy." Ranger wagged his tail, and just like that, in the middle of a war, a friendship was born that no one had expected. The first few days with Ranger at the base were chaotic. Nathan Reynolds knew keeping a dog in a war zone wouldn't be easy, but he underestimated how much resistance he would face. Bureaucracy was a nightmare, and the higher-ups saw Ranger as a problem waiting to happen. Sergeant Miller wasted no time making his opinion clear. "This is a military base, Reynolds, not a damn animal shelter." Nathan stood firm. "Sir, this dog was trained. He can be useful." Miller scowled. "If I see that dog interfering with operations, I'll personally throw him out." Nathan clenched his jaw. Ranger wasn't going anywhere. The problem was that Ranger didn't make things easy. At first, he trusted no one but Nathan. He growled when other soldiers got too close and became restless at the sounds of gunfire and helicopters overhead. Whenever the troops trained at the shooting range, Ranger curled up behind Nathan, his body tense, ears flat. He had seen war before, and Nathan could tell he hadn't been trained for protection. He had been used as a tool. Nathan wanted to change that. As the days passed, Ranger started adapting. Nathan shared his food with him, slowly helping him regain his strength. His coat, once dull and dirty, started to shine again. Little by little, the soldiers warmed up to him. The first to truly accept Ranger was Torres, a soldier from Alabama with an easygoing attitude. "So, this is the famous Ranger," he said, tossing a piece of jerky to the dog. Ranger caught it midair and chewed it, finally not backing away. Torres grinned. "I think he likes me," Nathan smirked. "He likes food." Torres shrugged. "Well, we have that in common." Before long, Ranger became a part of daily life at the base. When soldiers worked on vehicles, he rested under the trucks. When patrols returned exhausted, he was waiting at the gates. Though he remained closest to Nathan, Ranger was no longer just a stray. He was family. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. One night, Nathan was called to the command center. Captain Harris was waiting, arms crossed. "Reynolds, why the hell is there a dog sleeping in the barracks?" Nathan hesitated. "Sir?" Harris held up a phone. On the screen was a photo of Ranger, sprawled out on Nathan's cot, fast asleep. Harris pinched the bridge of his nose. "I told you, if I caught that dog in a soldier's bed, you'd be digging trenches for a month." Nathan swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. 5 a.m. tomorrow. You and the dog start digging." Nathan nodded, biting back a smirk. Ranger was worth every punishment. Weeks passed, and then came the moment Ranger would prove his worth. A midnight patrol to a remote village. The mission: gather intel and return before sunrise. At first, everything seemed fine. But Ranger knew better. His body stiffened, his ears perked. He sniffed the air, then let out a low growl. Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. "Torres! Something's wrong." Before Torres could respond, the first explosion hit. The ground shook violently, knocking soldiers off their feet. The flash of fire and smoke lit up the night as gunfire erupted. They had walked straight into an ambush. Nathan tried to run for cover, but something slammed into his shoulder. A bullet or shrapnel, he couldn't tell. The impact sent him crashing to the ground, the taste of blood filling his mouth. His vision blurred. The world tilted and darkened. The last thing he felt was something warm beside him, Ranger's breath, his presence. Then, everything went black. Pain dragged Nathan back to consciousness. His body felt heavy, his limbs weak. He struggled to open his eyes, but the world remained a hazy mess of blood and dust. Something wet and warm touched his face, a faint breath, a soft whimper. Nathan knew that touch. Ranger. The dog hadn't left him. Nathan tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He was hurt, badly. The battle still raged in the distance, but no one had come for him. Maybe they thought he was dead, but Ranger knew better. He whined, nudging Nathan's hand, refusing to let him drift away. But Ranger also knew something else. Nathan wouldn't last long. So he made a decision. He had to get help. With one last look at his soldier, Ranger turned and ran. Back at the base, Nathan's name was already on the casualty list. The soldiers who had made it back believed he was gone. Then, Ranger appeared. He was covered in dust, his paws bloody from running across sharp terrain. But he didn't stop. He sprinted through the gates, barking frantically, tugging at soldiers' uniforms. Torres was the first to notice the blood on Ranger's fur. Wait, that's not his blood. Sergeant Miller went pale. Reynolds, Captain Harris grabbed the radio. "Get a rescue team ready now." The entire base knew one thing. If Ranger was here, Reynolds was alive. Nathan was barely hanging on. The darkness kept pulling at him. Then, footsteps, voices. Someone shouted, "We found him!" Then hands, strong, steady hands pulling him from the rubble. Nathan tried to focus. His vision was still hazy, but he felt something else. A familiar warmth, a presence at his side. Ranger. The dog hadn't left. Nathan exhaled a weak laugh. "You never give up, do you?" Ranger whined, nudging him gently. Nathan closed his eyes. He knew he was finally safe. Nathan Reynolds woke up to the rhythmic beeping of medical monitors. His body ached, his head throbbed, and his shoulder burned with pain, but he was alive. The soft hum of a helicopter engine told him they were airborne. He was being evacuated. His mind was still foggy when he felt a familiar weight next to him. Even before turning his head, he knew who it was. Ranger. The dog lay beside the stretcher, eyes half closed, his breathing steady but watchful. His fur was matted with dust and dried blood, not his own, but Nathan's. Nathan tried to lift his hand, but the effort made him wince. Ranger noticed. Slowly, he lifted his head, nudging Nathan's arm with his nose. Nathan forced a weak smile. "You did it, buddy. You saved me." Ranger didn't need to respond. Nathan already knew what he would say if he could. "I wasn't going to leave you." When the helicopter landed back at Fob Red Rock, a crowd had already gathered. Word had spread fast. Everyone knew what had happened. How Ranger had refused to leave Nathan behind. How he had run through enemy territory to get help. And now, as Nathan was carefully lifted off the aircraft, all eyes were on Ranger. Soldiers who had once dismissed him as a stray now looked at him differently. With respect, Nathan saw Captain Harris standing near the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, watching everything unfold. Torres was there too. When he saw Nathan awake, he grinned. "You really are impossible to kill, Reynolds." Nathan chuckled, but even that small movement sent a jolt of pain through his body. Torres then crouched next to Ranger, patting his side. "And you, Sarge, might just be the best damn soldier in this unit." Miller, standing nearby, scoffed. "If this dog gets promoted before me, I swear," Nathan smirked. "Maybe you should work harder, Miller." Laughter rippled through the group. But beneath the humor, they all knew the truth. Ranger had done something extraordinary, and it wasn't going to be forgotten. Nathan's recovery was slow. He spent weeks in the infirmary, his shoulder healing from the shrapnel wound, and Ranger never left his side. At first, the medics tried to remove the dog, claiming it was against regulations. They quickly realized they weren't winning that fight. The first time they dragged Ranger out, he somehow found his way back in within minutes. By the third time, they gave up. "Fine, he stays. But if he pees on anything, it's on you, Reynolds." Nathan just smiled. That was a price he was willing to pay. Days later, Captain Harris entered the infirmary. Nathan sat up, expecting another lecture about regulations. Instead, Harris held out a folder. Nathan took it and opened it slowly. At first, his tired brain didn't process the words. Then, his breath caught in his throat. It was an official commendation. "For Ranger." Nathan blinked, rereading the words. This is real." Harris nodded. "Completely real." The document formally recognized Ranger as a military working dog. It was rare, almost unheard of, for an unofficial stray to earn a place in the military. And yet, Ranger had done it. Nathan looked up at Harris, still in shock. "So, does this mean he stays?" Harris exhaled, rubbing his temples. "It means he's one of us now. Officially." Nathan looked at Ranger, who was watching the exchange with quiet curiosity. "Hear that, buddy? You're a real soldier now." Ranger wagged his tail. Nathan wasn't sure if the dog understood the words, but he understood the meaning. He wasn't going anywhere. Months passed. Nathan eventually returned to duty, but things were different now. A Ranger was no longer just a presence at the base. He was part of the team. He trained with the soldiers, learning hand signals and advanced commands. He went on patrols, sniffing out dangers before anyone else could detect them, and when things got rough, he was always there. One night, Harris called Nathan into his office. Nathan entered, expecting another assignment or briefing. Instead, Harris handed him another file. Nathan frowned. "Sir?" Harris sighed. "Your deployment is over. You're being sent home." Nathan felt his stomach drop. Home. It was strange to hear the word. For so long, this place had been his reality. And then, another thought hit him. He looked at Ranger, who was sitting beside him. What about him? Harris gave him a long look. Then he handed Nathan a second document. Nathan's eyes scanned the paper, and then his breath hitched. Authorization for adoption. Nathan looked up, his throat tight. "Sir, is this—" Harris cut him off. "He saved your life, Reynolds. He's yours." For a second, Nathan couldn't speak. Then he knelt beside Ranger, gripping his fur. "We're going home, buddy." Together, Ranger licked his face. And for the first time in years, Nathan felt truly free. The plane touched down on U.S. soil. Nathan stepped out onto the tarmac, breathing in the air. It was strange. No gunfire, no sand, no tension, just home. And beside him, Ranger took his first steps on American soil. The moment they left the airport, Nathan took Ranger to meet his mother. She had waited at the gate, tears in her eyes when she saw her son. But when she saw Ranger, she gasped. "Is this the dog who saved you?" Nathan nodded. "Yeah, Mom. This is Ranger." His mother knelt down, reaching out carefully. Ranger hesitated. For so long, the only world he had known was one of war, of soldiers, of battle. But then he felt her touch, gentle, warm, safe. And for the first time, he relaxed. Nathan watched as his mother wrapped her arms around Ranger, whispering words of thanks. And Ranger let her, because for the first time in his life, he was not just a soldier, he was home. What was the most emotional part for you? If you believe Ranger deserves all the recognition in the world, drop A in the comments. Like and subscribe for more powerful stories. If you could give Ranger a medal, what would it say? Comment below. See you in the next story.